So basically, this is a very interesting topic that Amir asked me to present on. What happens when Islamic and quote-unquote modern or Western values clash? And is this not post-house amendments? How about that? Is that still?
That's much better.
That's better?
That's better.
I don't know, as closer as it can get. Just clip it to my bit. Is that better?
Also, I gave you options. You chose this topic.
No, that's fine. I mean, it was one of the options. It's the most exciting option. So it's an interesting question because it actually poses a number of first just framing questions, which is one, what you can imagine a couple of situations. So it's like, let's take Islamic and Western values when they clash. So you could either say you take the Western one, or you take the Islamic one, or you try to reconcile them, or you maybe determine that there's not actually a clash to begin with, that it's just an illusion or something like that, right? But I mean, it confronts you first and foremost with a choice about what values you're going to follow. I mean, and I think this is something that a lot of us maybe don't think about or try not to think about, or maybe just goes on kind of like the background programming of our brains. I mean, what are the ultimate sources of our values? What are the ultimate sources of truth for us? And there's I always think about this. It's an odd movie to come into my mind when this comes up. Anyone ever seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade? So I saw it before I became Muslim, so I mean, it was Christian technically at the time, maybe it had different resonance, but it's all about trying to find the Holy Grail and being Indiana Jones. There's a great scene at the end, spoilers, where the bad guy, who's a Nazi, he basically makes Indiana Jones kind of go and actually do these different tests of faith. And he asks him, it's time to ask yourself what you believe. That line always comes into my mind for some reason. Unfortunately, it's said by a Nazi. And I was going to actually show the clip, but then right before that, they shoot Sean Connery, and then that's like very disturbing. He survives, don't worry. But the point is that it was like, but that line always comes into my mind. You always have to ask yourself. It probably comes a time in a lot of people's lives, but in the lives of Muslims in the West, it comes a lot. We're constantly being asked, what do you believe? What do you really believe? And what are you really going to use as the basis for the choices you make? And just recently, there's been some controversy because this one Muslim woman who's a very adamant feminist, might say a bit radical. She, wrote this blog about how she doesn't like the Prophet, she doesn't love the Prophet. She has all these, she's always negative feelings towards him. And, it's been interesting to watch people's response to this, because you kind of have to, I think you have to choose about, it's not necessarily how do you feel comfortable with everything about Islamic history? Do you feel, when you read the Quran, or questions that come into your mind, when you hear hadiths, or there are questions that come into your mind? Of course there are questions that come into your mind. There are questions that come into my mind. Everything I study, everything I research, every book I write, every article I write, is an attempt on my part to answer a question I have, right? But the question is, how do you approach these moments of doubt or confusion? Do you approach them with a veneration for the Quran and the Prophet, or do you approach them with hostility and suspicion? And so it's like in these moments of choosing what you believe isn't really just about saying, I know this is the truth, I know that's the truth, and this is where it's also about, where am I willing to place my trust? Where am I willing to spend effort to understand? It's my opinion, as someone, I've been Muslim for about 20 years, right? The Islamic tradition, to me, when I first became Muslim, I was very skeptical. I was actually very kind of, not that there's anything wrong with Fazl Rahman, but I was very kind of Fazl Rahmani Islamic modernist, very dismissive towards classical Muslim scholarship. For the first couple of years I was Muslim, I didn't go and study with any shuyukh I could have met all these people who died in those years, like, but and I didn't meet them because I was too busy being arrogant. Because I really thought that the Islamic tradition was just kind of this thing in the past, and now we were going to come and rescue it from the darkness of the past and medieval times and things. And actually, the more I learned about it, the more respect I gained for it, and the more I realized that if you're willing to take the time to access this tradition, it will give you amazing benefits and it has incredible insights. And the more I did that, the more critical I became of the way of the certainties and the truisms that I had grown up with as an American, and that we're constantly sort of fed in our society. And you start to realize, who's in crisis? Who's in crisis? Imam Zaid Shakir just yesterday gave a khutbah in California, and you can find it on YouTube. I really recommend listening to it. It's incredible. He talks about what Islam does for people in America. We're constantly criticizing. Muslims are constantly criticizing Islam. We're constantly talking about its problems, Muslims' problems. What are the pathologies? It's almost like we're in a bad relationship. Just constantly complaining. Eventually, you ask yourself, like, why am I in this relationship? Well, Zayd Shakir says, like, look at this. We forget the guidance and the truth and the beauty of this message, what it does for people's lives. We get obsessed with the people who complain about it, because these are the people who are given a platform. These are the people whose voices are magnified in the media. So, when values clash, that's the topic today, inshallah. Okay. So, the first question we should always ask whenever you're thinking about something in a serious way is, what are the things you're talking about? How do you define the terms you're discussing? We'll talk, inshallah, we'll have time to talk about Western values. But first, I want to talk just about, what are Islamic values? What are these Islamic values? Where do they come? What are they? What are we talking when we talk about Islamic values? In one sense, there are things that are not controversial. So, for example, it's good to be honest. It's good to be punctual, right? It's good to fulfill your obligations, to fulfill your promises. It's good to be charitable. It's good to be kind. It's good to be forgiving, right? These aren't the things we're talking when we talk about values clashing. These are things that are pretty common between religious traditions. They're common even for people who don't follow religious traditions. Maybe one area I was just thinking about, I don't want to get into it too much, but one area where there might be a clash between ethical clashes between, let's say, a lot of Muslims and maybe mainstream American society would be on things like animal rights, right? The idea that a lot of Muslims talk about the need for humane treatment of animals, where you don't have like industrial slaughter, or you don't have animals, cooped up and chickens being electrocuted and cows getting their skulls crushed in by metal bolts and stuff like that. And that maybe we should eat a lot less meat because we shouldn't, if it's expensive to eat a cow that's been raised in a humane way, maybe you just shouldn't eat as much cow. I think there are some areas that are like really, ethical areas, not necessarily dealing with concrete laws, concrete, haram and halal things that might be controversial, but I think these are actually also areas that are up for discussion in American society in general. There's a lot of discussion in American society in general about issues of ethics, or animal rights and ethics. Okay. So, what are the nature of the rulings that really when we're talking about the clash of values, I think we're talking about rules of the Sharia. The fact that Muslims can't do certain things, they shouldn't do certain things that other people do, they're required to do things that other people don't do. These are what we're talking about. Okay. So there's two general categories of Islamic legal rulings. Now, you could come up with a lot of different kind of schemata or different ways to divide up Islamic legal rulings, but this is just one way, but it's for our purposes, it's I think the most useful for this discussion. So the first type of Islamic legal ruling is what's called thawabit. Thabita, and the plural is thawabit. These are things that do not change. These are things that do not change. The second one is mutaghayyirat. Mutaghayyirat are things that do change over time. Rulings that do change over time or over between circumstances or between different places. So the first type, thawabit, there's two types underneath that. There's two types of thawabit ruling. One is what's called reasoned, or mu'al'al, reasoned, and the second are unreasoned, which sometimes translated as tawqifi, or as in Arabic, tawqifi. So an example of the second one is there are 5 daily prayers. Why not 4 daily prayers? Why not 6 daily prayers? Why do you say the prayer by moving your hand like this and bowing like this and getting up like that? Because this is what God revealed, and this is to either directly in the Quran or to the Prophet, and this is what we follow. So there's certain things that are just rules with no basis for them. Why is pork prohibited? We can sit around all day and theorize about why pork is unhealthy or why pigs are unclean or something like that. But you know what? If it turned out that pigs are clean and really healthy, it still would be prohibited. Correct? So there's no stated reason. The Quran just says it's rijis, right? It's filth. It's almost like ritually filthy. It doesn't even necessarily matter if it's technically clean or not. So some things are just tawqifi. These are just rules that are revealed by God. And then there are thawabit rules that are mu'allal, which means that they have a reason behind them, but the reason doesn't change. The reason doesn't change. The prohibition on alcohol and other intoxicants. This is prohibited in drunkenness is prohibited in the Quran. Consumption of intoxicants is prohibited in the Sunnah of the Prophet. And the reason is made clear indirectly and through kind of commentary in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet, which is that wine makes you, it has bad effects on people, right? It makes people lose their reason, lose their inhibitions. It causes them to act in ways they normally wouldn't. It causes them to lose their reason. So, and this doesn't matter. That's never going to change. So there's a reason there, but it's never, you might say, well, let's say I just drink a little bit of wine. No, that's also prohibited. Or let's say I'm in a country where everybody drinks a little bit of wine every day, and it's totally normal. Well, it's still prohibited. Let's say everybody around me wants me to drink wine. They say, you'll be really cool, and we don't want to talk to you if you don't drink wine. You still can't drink wine. So these things, there's a reason behind it, but the reason never changes because wine will always, intoxicants will always compromise your reason. Okay. So then there's a type of thawabit that has a reason behind it, but there's something else about it which makes it interesting for our purposes, which is that it is taking the custom of the time of the Prophet ﷺ and is basically stamping it authoritatively. Now, it's very important here to pause and think about this concept, which you'll see mentioned a number of times in this lecture. The notion of urf. Urf is custom. Now, for us, the word custom, when we think about custom, what do you do at Christmas time? What do you do at Eid? We think of kind of traditions and things like that. We don't think about custom as something that's absolutely pervasive in our daily life. When Muslim scholars talk about urf, they mean the rules that govern your daily life. So, for example, when I came into this parking lot, I assumed that I would park in a certain type of place. Right? I assumed that I would park in a straight line. We assume that there's going to be a certain amount of space between each car. And we may never even have been told this. We just learned this over time. So this custom. The fact that, you take your shoes off, you come into the mosque. The fact that when you know how expensive a birthday present to get somebody. If I get someone a birthday present, I don't want to get them, it should be within this price range or that price range. Or what do you do when your kid's friend has a birthday? What are you supposed to do with the birthday party? Do you stick around or can you leave? When I was a kid, the parents came and dropped you off and left. Is that the same for everyone else? Am I crazy? I remember you go and your parents leave. Now apparently you have to stay. Which strikes me as, well, first of all, I don't understand how those parents dealt with all those kids, but then it's also it's a big waste of my time, Sorry, kids. Actually, kids are here right now. Maybe they're not listening. So the point is, the urf is everywhere around us. Most of the choices we make, even think about this. What is it when you talk to your husband, your wife, or your brother or sister, what is it that makes your conduct right or wrong? When you say, like, if someone's spouse says, what you did was wrong. You were supposed to put away the dishes. You need to put the dishes away. That was wrong. Or, you said this to me. This was wrong or right. This is all custom. This is all straight up custom. Because you go to another country, another Muslim country, they have totally different rules. And by the way, they're right in their country. So custom is extreme. There's one of the 5 main legal maxims, one of the 5 main rules that Muslim scholars use in applying the Sharia is al-'ada muhakkama, or a different version of 'ada muhakkama. 'Ada is like another word for urf. So it is empowered. It's probative. Custom is absolutely essential for talking about right and wrong. Now, there's what's the difference between the mutaghayyirat when it comes to custom and the thawabit when it comes to custom is a thawabit case is one that takes the custom of the time of the Prophet and basically freezes it in authoritative state. It makes it permanent. So, for example, when the Quran says that women should not show of their beauty except ma dhahara, illa ma dhahara, except what shows. Well, if you want to take a totally decontextualized reading, that would mean by custom, whatever in America a woman would normally show, that would be what the Quran is talking about. So if in America women generally wear, let's say, skirts that go down to at least their knee, they wear maybe a long sleeve shirt or a short sleeve shirt or something like that, and their hair is uncovered. Well, if we were just to take that Quranic verse and apply it in the US, that's what it would mean, pretty much. But that's not what the Quran means, because at least the way all Muslim schools of law understand it, because the Prophet ﷺ himself explained what that means when he said for women it's everything except their hands and their face. And so that authorized the urf of the Prophet, and it becomes permanent. It becomes permanent. Same thing for men. I mean, you can say, for example, that the Prophet ﷺ, when he's talking about prohibiting silk for men, he's doing it because silk was particularly rare in that time and place, and it was only the richest people who wanted to show off would wear that. Okay, but that doesn't. This was authorized. This was stamped with kind of permanent approval by the Sunnah of the Prophet. And so Muslim men are not allowed to wear silk ever. No, you can wear silk if it's within a certain number of fingers width. You can wear it as like lining the stuffing of your coat. You would if you have a medical problem, but you can't wear silk otherwise. Okay. So those are thawabit. These things do not change. Then the vast majority of Islamic legal rulings are mutaghayyirat. This means they change according to person, according to time, according to place, according to circumstances, according to context, according to the system you're in. It's a basic principle in Islamic law. Al-ahkam tataghayyar bil-makan wa-zaman wal-ashkhas wal-anzima. Rulings change, these rulings change, mutaghayyirat rulings change according to time, place, people, and systems. So some of these things are the structure, the outside structure in this go by custom, go by urf. So for example, the Quran says that either you marry people, you keep your wife bil ma'ruf, according to what's urf, what's known to be right, or you send them away bi ihsan, in a goodly way. Okay, so you have two basic principles. There are other things from the Sunnah of the Prophet and the Quran. That there's a mahr, the husband has to pay mahr. That there's some kind of witnessing. There's some kind of contract, right? There's some kind of agreement, there's witnessing, there's a mahr. And these are the basic building blocks of a marriage. And that you're supposed to either stay with your spouse in a way that's goodly and right, or send them away in a way that's beneficent. What all that stuff means is all up to urf. So, for example, what is a wife What is a wife's duty in the house? Is she supposed to do the dishes? Is she supposed to cook? Is she supposed to take care of the kids? What's a husband's job? Is he supposed to do dishes? Is he supposed to cook? Is he supposed to help clean up? This all is based on custom. And by the way, from when Muslim jurists talking about it, it's not just time and place, it's also class. Social class is really important. And this is really awkward to talk about in America, because we don't like to talk about class. The unspoken four-letter word in American society, class. But this is a huge issue. Why is there this notion of kafa'a, or suitability in Islamic marriage? Because oftentimes, it's very hard for people who come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different classes, to live together. They're used to different things. They're used to different, getting up and having to do X or not having to do Y. So this stuff is all determined by custom. But I want to be very clear about this. When I say something's determined by custom, it doesn't mean it's unimportant. Custom has real moral value for Muslims. Just like it has real moral value for Americans. But Americans don't like talking about custom and immoral because it just seems like the way we do things. Unless they're doing the whole, in America we do this, versus other, like kind of. But, we in the United States like to think about everything we do has some really moral or principled, constitutional, liberal reason behind it, or religious reason behind it. But in fact, so much of it is just custom. It's just the way we do things. Why do people in America walk into buildings with their shoes on? Where were we the other day? We were at some house the other day. Layla, where were we? What? Oh, it's at our friend's house? Oh, you went to their house, and my kids could not understand why they weren't taking their shoes off. And you think about it, it's ridiculous. Why? I cannot deal with people with shoes in my house anymore. When I first became Muslim, I would walk, when I grew up, we walked in the house all the time with shoes. Now I think it's absolutely disgusting. That's just custom. Why would you? There's no reason to walk into your house with your filthy shoes. But people do it. It's just the way they've lived. That's their custom. Okay. There's other things. So there's one type of custom, or mutaghayyirat ruling, which has a kind of fixed structure to it, but inside the details are all based on custom and urf and can change according to time and place and suitability. But then there's other things that are just totally determined by custom. Totally determined by custom. So, for example, and this is a great fatwa, Imam al-Ghazali, he has a small fatwa book. It's actually one of the earliest fatwa books that survived. A guy asked him, if you're going to a bathhouse, like now they did Turkish bath, but back then it was just the everybody bath. Ever been to a Turkish bathhouse? Sounds like a scene in an airplane. Ever seen the movie Airplane? Where he's like, have you ever been to a Turkish prison or something? So he says if you go into a bath and some guy's gotten all soapy and put lather everywhere, and you go and you slip on the soap and you fall and you injure yourself, who's liable? Is it the bath owner or the guy with the soap?
The guy that fell.
No, it totally depends, right? So it depends. What's the urf? Is it the urf in that place that the owner of the manager is supposed to go around and squeegee the place constantly, right? If he's supposed to be doing that and he's not done that, he's liable. But let's say he's not supposed to squeegee. In your city or your town or wherever, if you go in, you're like, okay, soapy soap, water, okay, whatever. That's fine. But let's say this guy gets a colossal amount of lather. Dumps the whole bubble bath in. Have you ever done that? And bubble bath, just put my kids do this on it, they dump the whole thing in. You just get a mountain of bubbles. Just bubbles everywhere. So then someone walks in and they're like, then the guy is liable because he went way overboard in terms of the amount of lather he generates. So there's no hadith where the Prophet says, verily, if you generate a lot of soap lather, you're liable, right? They didn't have bathrooms. They didn't have baths. Okay? So this is just straight up notion of liability based on effectively just common sense. But a notion, especially empowering custom. All right. Here we go. Another thing, so what are the type of rulings? Those are the type of rulings we talked about. Tawabit and mutaghayyirat. Very important. The second thing, how good are the arguments? And this is tough to talk about because it's always controversial, especially in a community that's embattled, like the Muslim community, that's constantly feeling like it's under attack. It's feeling like any internal discussion it has is just going to be a way of shoehorning in outside disapproval, right? That any internal discussion is just somebody becoming a sellout. But it's also important when we think about how good are the arguments behind these rulings. These rulings don't just appear out of nowhere in the Islamic legal tradition. They come from somebody. They come from arguments. So what are the type of sources? So what are the sources for Islamic legal rulings? One is what's called nusus. Nusus means texts. It means basically the text of the Quran and the Hadith. The text of the Quran and the Sunnah. One is nusus. Then another major source is companion opinions, the opinions of the companions. Just for example, sorry, Amir. Amir, I like bringing up slavery, but this is actually a really interesting case because it's a ruling that all the madhabs take. But it doesn't come from the Quran, it doesn't come from the Sunnah of the Prophet. Umar ibn Khattab, he said that a slave girl, her aura is the same as a man's aura. Interesting. So but there's no, this is then the ruling for everybody, but it's not, it's just Umar's ruling. Okay. Early Muslim practice. The practice of the early Muslim community. For example, why, when the khutbah starts, what happens? You look over there, you turn face that wall, you turn face this wall, you start walking around, right? What do we all do when the khutbah starts? Everybody turns to face the khatib. This is agreed upon. There's no authentic hadith or even a semi-reliable hadith on this. This is just early Muslim practice. Everybody does it, and it gets cemented as a ruling. And then finally, qiyas, or analogical reasoning. This is extremely important. This is a very important mechanism for extending legal rulings. For example, let's say, good case. Let's say you have a garden in your house, and then you water your plants, but you're watering your plants with water that has najasa in it. Can you eat those plants? Let's say you have dogs, your neighbors, my neighbors all have dogs, and for some reason they all think that it's okay to those dogs to come and urinate in my garden. And they're so confident about it that I haven't questioned them, because if they're so confident about it that maybe I'm the one who's wrong about this, you know what I mean? That I think this is the urf. But they come right up to the house, and they pee, the dog goes right next to my window. I'm sitting. Okay, so can I eat the food in the garden? This is an interesting question. Here, the answer is it's analogy on taghyir al-ma. So when you say in the Shafi and the Hanbali school of law, let's say you're doing wudu, or let's say you have a bathtub full of water, and then your kid as a little drop of urine goes into the water. Can you that water still clean? They still take a bath in it? If it's a big enough amount of water, like a bathtub full about, and it doesn't change the smell, the taste, or the color, it's fine. It's based on hadith of the Prophet. So, an analogy to that, we say, if it doesn't change the taste or color or smell of the plants, let's say so many of those dogs come into my yard and pee on my plants that I eat the carrot and I'm like, this doesn't taste like a normal carrot. So then I can't eat the carrot. So this is an analogy based on the changing of water, or the use of hadith about wudu. Okay. Now, so those are the sources. What about the strength of the arguments? It's not just about the sources, it's about what you're deriving. So when I give you that example about the changing water of the vegetables, I don't know, I think that's a pretty good argument. Maybe, I don't know, makes sense. Right? You can wash the outside of the vegetable, that's not a problem. But what about the water inside it? But if it hasn't changed it, then it seems like that's not a good argument. Okay, but then, like for example, I'm sorry for my Hanafi brethren, but this is one, I think, one of the all-time worst qiyas arguments. What is the minimum mahr? Oh. What happened? Somebody woke up. Yeah, exactly. He doesn't want to pay minimum mahr.
Where's Amin?
So the minimum mahr for the other in the other schools of law, there's no minimum mahr. You can pay like 1 penny or something. Okay. But in the Hanafis, it says there's a minimum mahr, and it's based on 12 dirhams. 12 dirhams. Why? Because 12 dirhams is the minimum. The minimum that a good, a value has to be. If you steal it, you might get handcuffed. By the way, if you're interested in that issue of the hudud punishment, read my article on yaqeen.org on hudud. It's called Stoning and Hand Cutting. It discusses this at length in an accessible way. I recommend it. But in theory, 12 dirhams, 12 silver coins is the minimum value of something that you would steal, that you would have part of your body chopped off. So the Hanafi argument was, okay, getting married, you're sort of like, you're like engaging in this bodily process, which we won't get into because there are kids in the room, but, there's like certain bodily damage that occurs, and why not just go with this 12 dirham since that's also bodily damage? That is bad. I think that's a bad argument. And the other madhabs also thought that was a bad argument. So you can sometimes look at how good is the argument here. Finally, the last source is consensus. The Muslims believe that if all Muslim scholars agree on something, then it's true, right? But this is extremely rare. These are things that are called ma'lum min ad-din bid-durura, known essentially as part of the religion. And going back all the way to Imam Shafi'i said, al-ijma' fil usul la fil furu'. Ijma' occurs in the basic principles of our knowledge. It doesn't occur in the details. So 5 daily prayers, zina is prohibited, stealing is prohibited, you have to pay zakat, you have to fast in Ramadan, you have to believe in angels, right? These are the things that are, maybe you can come up with a page or so. Everything else is going to be disagreed on. So ijma' is a really strong source of an argument, but it doesn't cover a lot of material. But of course, the interesting thing is today, with Muslims today, right, we're actually finding people questioning regularly those things that have consensus on them. So this is actually an issue of discussion. Okay, so you can imagine like what are the kind of combinations of source and argument quality. So there's some things where there's clear nusus and there's just no disagreement. There's almost no interpretation required. For example, that zina is prohibited. Everybody knows zina is prohibited, and and everybody knows that those things that lead up to zina are prohibited. Okay, there's nusus that are reliable and clear, but there's still a lot of disagreement about how we should understand them. For example, the Quranic verses and the hadiths on dealing with riba. All classical Muslim scholars agree that any kind of transaction where you have an interest increase would be riba. But where do they disagree? They disagree kind of, is this tawqifi or is there a reason behind it? And we talked about that before, tawqifi versus mu'allal. So if you think it's like tawqifi, like eating pork, then you can come up with, let's say you come up with a thing that's just like pork, but not pork. Then it's okay. So if I come up with a thing that's just like riba, but not riba, then I can do it. And then you have, Islamic finance, and all those other things like that. I'm not criticizing this. Obviously, Islamic finance is a very contested field. I'm just saying there's a certain sense where, it depends if you think that there's just certain formal things about riba that you have to avoid, and once you avoid them, you can progress as you wish. And that's sort of the majority of Muslim schools of law. And the other school says, no, wait a second. This is the Maliki school. They say, no, hang on a second. There's a purpose behind this. The purpose is we don't want, interest is prohibited because it's exploitative. So we want to, anything where you're doing the same thing and the result is occurring is prohibited. So, for example, the Maliki school doesn't allow things like double sale or murabaha al-amal bashira and all these other different techniques by which you essentially create interest-bearing loans without actually having riba. So there's clear nusus, but there's really disagreement about what should be done with them. And then there are things that, again, and I say this with like the most profound respect for all of these Muslim scholars and the Islamic tradition. But Muslim scholars are always people from a certain place, right? They always are, like for example, American Muslim scholars, if you ask them about democracy, they're probably going to say, yeah, democracy is good, democracy, yeah. If you go to another place where they don't have democracy, they'll say, oh, democracy is not good, right? So, it's just being honest to say that we're children of our time and of our place. We're affected by our environment. So Muslim scholars are affected by the environment. You especially see some of this stuff on issues of gender. So, for example, the idea that a father can marry off his daughter without her consent. This is a pretty common ruling in Muslim schools of law. Even though the Prophet ﷺ says that the unmarried daughter, the virgin daughter, the girl who's already been married, she is more right to her own decision, and the girl who's never been married, her opinion is asked, her consent is asked. Even though the Prophet specifically says this, you still see, Muslim scholars piling up evidence against that, where they say, for example, there's another hadith where the Prophet says, ask the orphaned girls if they want to get married. So let's say your orphans under your charge, and there's girls. You should ask them, okay, do you want to get married now, and do you want to get married to this guy? So the argument is, this is a very bad argument. Because he said, ask the orphan girls, it means don't ask the non-orphan girls. And you start reading this and you're like, okay, guys, But again, this isn't like, there's not some deception, there's not some conspiracy. The arguments are all right there. And other people will come along and say, that's ridiculous. The great thing about the Islamic tradition is, a lot of times, some Muslims get things wrong. But there's always somebody, or there's always not just one voice, but a number of voices. And oftentimes they're very senior scholars in Islamic history who will come out and say, I don't know, that's not a good argument. What about this? What about this concern? What about that concern? So we go back, we always find this discussion between more than one point of view. And you can see people like checking one another. Okay. Another thing is women's mosque access. There's a very good book if you want to read called Women's Mosque Access by Marian Katz, a scholar at New York University. It's very interesting to read. This is a case where the Prophet ﷺ says very clearly, لا تمنعوا إماء الله مساجد الله. Do not prevent the women, the slave women of God, i.e. women, from going to the mosques of God. And in the most reliable version of this hadith, which is in Sahih Bukhari, Ibn Umar tells about how his father, Umar bin al-Khattab, one of his wives, would go to the mosque to pray every night. And someone asked that wife, your husband lets you go to the mosque every night? And she says yes, and he would not dare to prevent me. So that's the most reliable version. The Prophet saying, do not prevent women from going to the mosque. And then we know that even during the companions' time, this was being practiced. Omar's wife said, no, it's my right to go to the mosque. Now, what's the argument against this? Is this a report from Aisha, where she says, if the Prophet were alive today, he would not allow women to go to the mosque. First of all, this is fascinating. Because we're used to always talking about how, things are different today. Yeah, the Quran says this, yeah, the Hadith says that, but things are different today. If the Prophet were around today, he wouldn't do this, he wouldn't do that, right? Because society and technology and economy has changed so much. We forget. Do you know who else went through massive social change? The first generation of Muslims. They went from being a bunch this is not an exaggeration, a bunch of shepherds and basically like leather merchants living in a tiny little place in the middle of nowhere that no one on earth cared about, to ruling the entire Middle East in their own lifetime. Just think about it. They encountered cultures and foods and languages and in snow and other things they hadn't even heard about. They didn't even know existed. They were in charge of those people. They went through tremendous social change. So here Aisha is saying things have changed so much. Remember, she dies around 58 Hijri, so that's like 680 or so, I'm just guessing, for the common era.
690.
What?
690.
690. Who said that?
I said that.
Not bad. You just did mental calculation? You're better at math than me. Can you do my taxes? Anyway, so this, but again, you have a command of the prophet, companion precedent, and against that you have the opinion of Aisha. And the opinion of Aisha is used by most of the schools of law to come up with the ones that discourage women's presence in the mosque, they use that argument. So you can see here there's a lot of just like kind of, in effect, cultures that are used to, especially elite women not leaving the house. Okay. How are we doing on time? Where's Amir?
7.
We have,
Almost 7.
so that means I have 7 minutes?
No.
7:26.
5:15 you can end.
Okay, that's fine. I think I have enough time. Okay, important points. Important points. What is absolutely right and what is absolutely wrong for Muslims is determined by revelation. So this is interesting. Muslims are always called, we're being accused of being so doctrinaire, extreme in our beliefs and our positions, so definitive in our positions. Actually, Muslim scholars are very, very rarely talk about things being right and wrong. Because they understood, Muslim scholars developed the Sharia as a group of people who were working in North Africa and Yemen and Central Asia and Iran, Iraq, and India and the Balkans, all these places. They knew very well that people totally disagree with one another. That these people take their shoes off, these people don't. These people, think it's disgusting to eat this, think it's disgusting to eat rotten fish. These people love eating rotten fish, right? People think it's great to eat, to go up and... Anyone ever been to Japan?
I live there.
You live there? So I don't know my experience. Like, when I went to Japan, I met my colleagues, like, hey, I was giving them a hug. They're like, oh, what are you doing? Why are you touching me? This is just basic stuff of how you interact with one another. How do you even talk? How many jokes do you tell, right? These things, they knew there's a huge difference in custom. And so they realized, if you really want to talk about what's right and wrong in an absolute sense, that means it's right all the time, or it's wrong all the time, no matter where you are, no matter when you are, you have to be pretty darn sure you have a basis for saying that. And most of the things that we talk about being right and wrong, we really can't make that kind of claim. Because there's other places where people who are just as smart as us, or just as moral as us, think differently. So what was decided is what's right and wrong are the things that God commands, or God prohibits. But this is crucial. This is actually only for Muslims. And this is where, in a weird way, Islamic law is like a lot more liberal than even European American society. Because Muslims acknowledge that certain things that were prohibited for Muslims and were totally wrong for Muslims were actually fine for other people. So eating pork is completely wrong for Muslims. Drinking alcohol, completely wrong for Muslims. Christians and Jews can do it. Muslims will allow them to do it and protect their rights. And if you go in the Hanafi school of law, if I go over and knock over my friend's keg and spill his, he just got his natty light keg at the beer shop near Georgetown, I have to pay him. I have to pay him for that.
These are my kids. What's up, kids? So this notion of right or wrong, this underlies the bodies of law. It's why Muslim scholars can come up with different schools of law with different rulings and not flip out about it. And not think, oh my God, how is it that my school of law says this is right, but another guy's school of law says it's wrong? I'm so confused. I understood. These are attempts to understand God's will. They're human attempts to understand God's will, and therefore they're only probabilistic. And a lot of times it's based on custom, which we acknowledge changes according to time and place. Okay. Now I said that these things are a lot of times only true for Muslims. But the Muslims, starting in the 700s, of the Common Era, started to develop something very interesting. I gave a talk in Germany about this about 2 weeks ago. Do you know Muslims invented human rights? I'm not just doing this thing where everyone's like, Muslims invented ice cream, Muslims invented this. No. Muslims actually invented human rights. They came up with a concept called hukuk al-ibad, which means the rights of the slaves of God, which means the rights of human beings. Sometimes they actually call them hukuk adamiyya, which literally means Adamic rights. So these are rights that every human being has. No, the Quran doesn't say, verily, these are the rights of human beings. The Sunnah doesn't say, verily, no. These are things that Muslim scholars beginning in the late 700s start to abstract out of the Quran, abstract out of the Sunnah, out of the companion opinions, out of the early Muslim method of thinking about law and ethics. And so they come up with three initial ones, which are what's called nefs or isma. This is physical inviolability. So I can't, what's your name? Ehab. So I can't go up to Ehab and just kick him in the head and think he has a right to not be injured and to not be killed. And if that right is violated, someone has to compensate him or his family. This is true whether he's Muslim or not. Okay. Right to property. If Ehab has a car outside, I can't just go take his car. There could be a situation in which his car gets taken away from him, but there has to be some just cause for that, whether he's a Muslim or not. And then finally, religion. This is very interesting. I thought Muslims are supposed to be, religious persecutors. I don't get this. No. Muslims, from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet, gave other people the right to practice their religion. They gave other people the right to basically say, I don't believe in Islam. I don't believe the Prophet's telling the truth. I think he's crazy or something like that. And I think your religion is ridiculous. And I'm not going to follow it. And I'm still going to live under Muslim rule. I'm still going to be protected by Muslim rule. And I'm going to have my religious rights back. And I can drink wine. And I can have a monastery and do all this other stuff. Okay? Yeah, I think I'm writing something now on churches and synagogues under Muslim rule. So you should keep your eye out on Institute.org for this. It'll be very interesting for you. This is really interesting because in American society, for example, do Americans say if you have polygamy, it's okay, you can have a polygamous marriage because it's okay in your religion? Do Americans say that? No way. They'd be like, you can't do this. This is horrible. Muslims were like, that's fine. I don't think this is I have a good article about this. It's called How Much Can Muslims Stomach? It's online. I talk about sati. Everyone know sati in India? Widow immolation. Muslims allowed that. Muslim rulers allowed that, as long as the woman was willing to do it herself. So you'd have to come and talk to the governor or the emperor or whatever, and they would just check. Are you someone making you do this? No. If you want to do it yourself, it's your religion. Go for it. And you can do it. Anyway, so this is like real liberalism. In the sense that they actually acknowledge that other religious traditions do things morally that they find unacceptable, that Muslims find unacceptable, as long as they're not violating these three rights: physical inviolability, property, religion. They can do those things. Why did the Muslim governors check to make sure the woman wasn't being forced to burn herself? Because then her right to physical inviolability would be violated. If she wants to do it herself, that's her religion. Even though suicide is prohibited in Islam. Even though it's morally reprehensible for Muslims. Okay. Finally, and I mentioned this before. I don't know. If it isn't, then you can have it. Or if it is, you can have it.
I'm going to replace it.
No, it's all right. I'm fine. I'm fully hydrated. So the last thing, urf and ada, custom, are extremely powerful. They're morally meaningful. This is important. They're not just, oh, this is custom. We think things that are customary for us are right for us. If someone does something, when someone doesn't tip a waiter, right? Or someone comes up to you and, it just happened to me yesterday, someone cuts you off when you're driving or something. Or you cut someone off accidentally and then they honk at you and you feel terrible. You feel angry and guilty at the same time. These are real feelings you have. Like the guy who's like, why didn't you tip this person? Why did you drive it? These are real feelings of outrage that can make you boil inside for the rest of the day and feel guilty for months and months and years. So custom is not to be poo-pooed. This is a really powerful thing in our lives. And Muslim scholars acknowledge this, and custom had its role. If it was something where the Sharia had given custom a role, for example, in how much mahr it is, or what the expectation of husbands and wives are to one another, mahr, the custom was determinative. And if it was something that was just purely based on custom anyway, like the lather in the bathhouse, they acknowledged this was determinative. As long as custom didn't violate the Sharia, it was acknowledged. Okay. Now, last thing. What are our values? Here, of course, I mean American values. I know it's awkward because we're American Muslims, but what are our values? I tried to come up with a list. This is really hard to do. And the fact that we don't really know what our values are just goes to show how this stuff is just permeates society's brains. It's very hard for society even to phrase what these values are. These are just a list I came up with. So one is liberty. Liberty is very important. And here, there's the famous example of the Mill Rule, John Stuart Mill's rule, which is, who knows? John Stuart Mill, utilitarian philosopher, who said, basically, you can do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anyone else. How many of us have heard this? It's okay, man. Do it. Man, he's not hurting anybody. Right? Egalitarianism. And this sounds like, democracy, egalitarianism, equality. That's true, that's a value in American society, but after the 1960s, this takes on a whole new dimension. Because that's when you start questioning the man. I gotta question the system, man, right? Like now, teachers, before professors, before the 1960s, professors would teach students moral stuff. They'd say, this is right, this is wrong, right? So you got moral education, part of the humanities or the liberal arts. But what happens in the 1960s and 70s? It's like, your parents, man, they're wrong. Like all these rules they have, they're messed up. You can't, right? So the idea, because by the way, those parents had done things like supported segregation, supported slavery, So there was a pretty good reason. Some people were like, these moral claims they're making might not be 100% sound. But what happens is you end up overthrowing a notion of hierarchy, an ethical hierarchy. And so you get egalitarianism, which is almost like anarchic. Even the notion of judging becomes unacceptable. Don't judge. Don't be so judgmental. We've all heard this, right? So just judging is bad because who are you to judge another person? Because who are you to think that your morality is better than theirs? Finally, or not finally, but thirdly, and this is kind of linked to that, also this emerges in the 1960s and 70s, the notion of the right to happiness. Right? Everybody has the right, you have the right to be happy. In your relationship, you have the right to be happy. If you're not happy in your relationship, you should leave it, because you have the right to be happy. Or, this is my favorite thing, you do you. Has anyone heard this? Or is this just something I saw on TV? You do you. Just worry about yourself. Make yourself happy. This is, Robert George is a philosopher at Princeton. He calls this the cult of the imperial self. So yourself and your appetites and what you want are imperial. And you kind of can steamroll other things and other ideas around you in order to pursue these things. Finally, and these things are all linked in Imagine, the notion of the importance of, absolute importance of autonomy, of subjective definition, of being yourself. What is subjective definition? Well, one sense, it's controversial, but things like gender, right? The idea that the fact that I, was born with certain body parts and we have other body parts, that doesn't mean anything. Because what really means is what I feel like inside. And everybody else around me needs to go not on my biology, but on how I subjectively identify. So, that looks exactly like my kid's jacket.
Really?
Yeah, it's fine. I don't think you're stealing his jacket. If you are, it's all right because it's covered in chocolate. So this notion that everyone else is supposed to kowtow to your subjective identification. And by the way, this has a lot to do with Muslims today, not just because of the gender thing. Because think about this: who has heard people say Islam is just what Muslims do? There is no Islam. It's just whatever Muslims think it is. So when a Muslim comes out and says, "I'm an atheist Muslim," now there's like people who are atheist. I'm an atheist Muslim. I want to come to the mosque and I want to give a khutbah. Well, if you say that Islam is just whatever you think it is, that person is just as much a Muslim as I am. Because they don't think there's something called Islam that binds people or a tradition that has any meaning. Everything is based on what you subjectively think it means to you. What are the problems with this? So American, I'm American, I was born here, my ancestors were born here, or came from God knows where, right? So I like it here a lot. I want to make that clear. And I especially like it because there's more and more places abroad that are turning into basically either like war-torn areas or failed states or like horrific, kitschy mid-20th century nationalist dictatorships and things like that. So I'm more and more appreciative of life in the United States. I want to make this very clear. These criticisms I'm offering, I offer out of love. Because I don't think it takes a genius to look around in our society and say, we have some problems. We have some problems. Some of them, we've already mentioned, but one of them with the mill rule. And this is, I find this is so funny. Because people, when they use the mill rule, you can do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anybody, they think they've come up with this totally culturally neutral, liberal idea that is not going to, it's like the minimum rule that human beings need in order to move around each other safely and respect each other's rights and things like that. But they forget, what's the definition of harm? Who defines harm? One person might think it's really different than another person. Another society might think it's really different from another society. And if you have a pluralistic society like the United States, sub-communities within that society might have a very different notion of harm than others. So anyone see this movie, The Big Sleep? No, The Big Sick. Daisies? There's any Daisies in the room? There's no Daisies in the room. There's 2 Daisies in the room. There's 3 Daisies in the room, mashallah. Okay, so you should see, it's about this Pakistani guy, right? Of course, it's like everybody's Hindu, the actors are all Hindu except for the actual guys. But it was an interesting movie. It's like the standard immigrant comes to America, I just want to be happy thing, conflict with his parents, arranged marriage, etc., etc. But there's one scene I found fascinating, where he says, I'm not, I don't want to be Muslim, I want to marry the white girl. And the dad says, you think the American dream is just about doing whatever you want. You've broken your mother's heart. You've broken your mother's heart. The American dream isn't just doing whatever you want. And I thought that was actually a very insightful line in the movie, and something that maybe we would, as a society, have a very hard time processing. Because most of the time when we watch our movies, it's all about, whoever saw The Little Mermaid? Remember The Little Mermaid? So remember Ariel, spoiler, she wants to marry the guy who lives on land, and then her father, Poseidon, the king of the sea, he says, she really does love him, doesn't she? And then she agrees, and he agrees, and lets his daughter go become a human being and live on land. So that's the fairy tale kind of American value, which is whatever the kid wants, the parent eventually is going to go, I just want them to be happy. But you know what? Families matter. What your family wants matters. Your parents being happy matters. The people around you, especially if you value them. If you value your family being happy, if you value the people around you accepting and liking what you do, then you can't do whatever you want. And when you do things that they don't want, even though you're not kicking them in the head or ramming their car, you're harming them. Okay. Second, egalitarianism. We're really going to say that everybody's equal? We're really going to say that no one can teach or judge other people? Because that's nonsense. Everybody knows that's nonsense because we constantly do it to our children. And if we're not doing it to our children, the schools are doing it to our children. You think our kids don't get taught things in school about morality? Even if they're being told, don't judge, that is immoral. Amoral, right? An instance of morality. So this notion of egalitarianism, it can sometimes just become a veil to obscure an ideology that is being pushed. Right to happiness, you do you, the cult of the imperial self. Does really nothing else matter? Nothing else matters. There's nothing, there's no virtue, there's no divine command, there's nothing about human nature, there's nothing about a tradition that matters. Everybody just does whatever they want. Autonomy, subjective definition of yourself. This is really premised on the kind of movie illusion of the 20-something living in an urban, who works and wears like a messenger bag and goes to his job every day, right? And he's got his friends, and you never hear his family except when he calls his mom on the phone every couple of weeks. Where everybody's just this disembodied brain floating around in society with a bunch of other disembodied brains. No one has any links to one another. This is absurd. Of course your relationships matter. Of course your families matter. Right? And guess what? If you go to the amusement park and let's say, what's your name with the Everlast shirt on? Ibrahim. Let's say Ibrahim goes to the amusement park. He wants to get on, like whatever the ride is. It's like you have to be tall for. The screamer roller coaster. Ibrahim says, "I'm actually 6 feet tall." What are they going to say to him? They say, "No, you're not. You're however tall you are, right? Something." But so we actually know this subjective notion of definition is kind of absurd. Right? So if I come up and say, I'm actually a woman, you might play along with that. But eventually, you're going to have a situation where I'm going to go and compete in like the women's wrestling match, and I'm just going to like obliterate other people, right? There's actually a case, you ever seen these? Every couple of months one comes up where some guy who's like, or person who's transgender is competing in the other group and just destroying a bunch of like poor high school girls or something in track and field. So eventually people are going to say, this is not really accurate. There actually are certain things about our bodies and our physical reality that mean something. And that means something for other people as well. Okay. The danger here, and this is what I'll end with. The danger. Liberalism can mean a lot of different things. There's a really good lecture on the Al-Walid bin Talal Center for Muslim Christian Understanding website, a lecture by a guy named Andrew March about different meanings of liberalism, if you want to watch it. But one of the basic meanings, and it's pretty good, is that liberalism privileges the right over the good. What does that mean? It means we are going to disagree about what's good. So what we're going to focus on is the right to do what you want. So we're going to focus on rights, not on what's good. So we're not going to think about what the best way to act is. We're going to think about everybody having the right to act the way they want, within certain restrictions, right? The problem is that what this means in a society that's pluralistic is that communities in that society start to lose their right to promote what they think is good in their own community. We can all see this happening around us, right? So if someone comes and says, I want to teach my kids a certain thing about marriage or family, I'm not allowed to teach that because that is seen as privileging good over other people's rights in the society. So liberalism becomes a way not of letting people pursue what they think is right, but of forcing people to reject their own traditions of right and wrong in favor of whatever the silent majority that's actually dictating right and wrong in that society is. Is that clear? This is the real danger. The real danger when we think about our values, American values. By the way, you can see this every single day in American media. You can see it. This is the right-left divide. This is the culture war divide. As a Muslim, alhamdulillah, I'm very happy with my values. But I'm actually, more than that, I feel that Muslims have a lot to offer this country and other Western countries. Because we actually have a way of thinking about rights and good together that's truly inclusive, that's actually truly pluralistic, but doesn't require different communities that totally disagree with each other to abandon their individual and distinct ethical systems. And I think I gave you some examples of that. So, the things to leave with. When you talk about clashes of values, first of all, ask yourself, when we're talking about a Muslim value, is this really Islamic rule that doesn't change at all? If it's something that it does change, should we think about it changing in our circumstances? There's a possibility. If we're presented with a rule, what are its sources? If the sources are, or what's the argument for it? Maybe the argument for it isn't as good as it should be to command our allegiance. And then when it comes to American values, be really, really attentive. Be really, really attentive to things people say. Things like, for example, that's harm. That's harmful. This is hurting someone else. Because it's in terms like harm, rights, and things like that a lot of the cultural traditions are actually imported into a system that's supposed to be culturally neutral, but is actually pushing certain, Western or Western European Christian idea of right and wrong, or what religion is, what religion isn't. Okay, Jazakumullah khair. I think it's time for prayer, right? Or not?
A couple of more minutes.
So are we gonna, should
3 minutes more.
so I guess you don't want to have Q&A in 3 minutes, right? Or is there supposed to be Q&A?
Well, that's your choice.
I'm happy to answer questions.
Can you give your introduction, brief introduction, please?
My brief is of me,
Yes.
like who I am.
Yes.
My name is Jonathan Brown. I'm a professor at Georgetown University in the School of Foreign Service. And, everything okay?
Yeah, no, I was just going to do an introduction.
Oh. I mean, I'm happy to do it myself. I know myself better than anyone. And I've been Muslim for like 20 years.
And how did you
I like
become?
walking in the park.
How did you come to Islam?
I became Muslim when I was in college. I took a course on Islam as a freshman. And I got very interested. And I became Muslim in the summer of between freshman and sophomore year.
Okay, let me ask you a political question. They keep telling us during elections, vote, 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 make a stance. But who am I going to vote for? One side is totally against my beliefs, abortion, for gay rights, for this and that. The other side has guns shooting at us, pretty much all over the world.
Wow, yeah, it's a tough call.
Can I answer that question?
Yeah, why not?
I'm running for Congress, so I think I.
Okay, yeah. What party?
Qualified.
Democratic Party.
Okay.
So can I go there and answer this question?
Could I
Well,
get
me,
this?
it's fine.
Can I get
I would say, my point, I vote Democrat, everything except the school board. School board, I vote Republican.
Why?
Why the Democrat or? Should I be answering this question? It seems like because I think that of the two options, which are both terrible, one of those options wants to purge my family from this country because it's a cancer, and the other doesn't, so I'm going to go with the non-you're a cancer party. But school board, definitely Republican, because the stuff, at least in Fairfax County, that has been trying to bring into school, to like sex ed and stuff, is just really scary. And so in that sense, the Republicans.
But other than the cancer issue, they're closer to us.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, but, you know, they can be as close to us as they want, but that's not going to be a big deal if we're like in a camp somewhere, you know?
Yeah. Okay, I get you.
I have a question about,
Yes.
you talked about hukuk al-ibad, and you talked about the freedom of religion, and under Muslim rule, people would be able to express their own religious freedom, so Christianity, Hinduism, atheism, etc. But when it comes to certain things like things that are against Islam, so you talked about, okay, if you're not Muslim, you'd still be able to drink wine, you'd be able to do, but what about things that go completely against Islam in terms of like the LGBTQ movement, when people want to get married, and they want to have marriage rights, and they want to have those types of rights? How do you...
So, I mean, one question is like, what would Muslims do in an Islamic setting? That's one thing. And then the other thing is like, what do American Muslims do? In my opinion, I mean, I think it's very important we teach our children that certain relationships are haram, and that we're very clear about that, right? But when it comes to, and like, in terms of the marriage, a Sharia marriage, or like our zawaj, can only be between men and women. But in terms of the American law, I support what's called gay marriage, not because I support their lifestyle, because they want the same thing I want. Like, so if you live in a state which has this Sharia bills and Sharia bills, my marriage with my wife is Sharia marriage. So I have my will is based on Hanbali's code of law. I have a zawad, marriage contract with my wife. If Sharia law anti-Sharia law gets passed, that's going to cease to be valid. And I don't, so what we both want, both LGBT communities and Muslims want notions of marriage that are stripped of this like Western European Christian cultural bias, right? So it just becomes like a form, X and Y have an agreement, and we call it marriage, right? But we don't care what it's called. We can call it, X plus Y agreement. This is just the state's way of acknowledging our relationship. So we both want the same thing. So I support gay marriage not because I support gay marriage, because I support what they want, because it's the same thing that I want.
You mean the benefits, to get the benefits?
Yeah, the idea that the marriage is not, if the U.S. government says, or state governments say, marriage is between a man and a woman, they are discriminating men just as much against Muslims as they are against gay people. Because, look, I'm not polygamous, and if I were, I wouldn't live very long. But the fact is, I am not going to condemn morally. I will never ever condemn this morally. Okay, and I will, and I think it's perfectly fine if people want to live that way. It's 100% fine. And I think it's. I see the kind of conservative American or Christian arguments against gay marriage. If you took out gay marriage and put in Muslim marriage, it'd be the same thing.
Yeah.
So we're a victim. We're just the next group in their crosshairs. So that's why I'm against the kind of family traditional marriage argument, because Muslims are just as easy victims of that as gay people.
I think Muslims fail to see that point of view, because I think that's very well said. But I think a lot of people clash when they talk about supporting gay marriage or certain types of things, because it's the same side. What you mentioned, how Muslims also face the same type of issues. But
I think part of it is that people don't remember, like, when we talk about gay marriage, we're not talking about the act when you go to the mosque and that. So that's my marriage. My marriage is a Sharia marriage before God. The thing I wrote in the state of Virginia is just a U.S. government thing. In that, for my marriage to be halal in God's eyes, it's the agreement I have with my wife. This other thing is just a document.
Well, thank you.
We're gonna cut questions after Maghrib. Take questions after Maghrib. We're gonna break for Salah, inshallah. Let me use the mic.
Anybody they want to make wuzu, they can go over there in the next room. They can.
Inshallah, we're gonna break for Salatul Maghrib right now. If anyone wants to make wudu, the wudu facilities is in the basement of the house, so the door under the deck in the back of the house. Again, the wudu facilities is in the basement of the house, the old masala where we used to pray. And Dr. Brown will take questions after Salatul Maghrib if there are any more questions, inshallah.
I was in Netherlands yesterday. Last week.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allah